fiery member of Congress, struggled mightily as her body rejected the unity theme.
I just don't get it. I mean, in a national tragedy, you love Donald Trump so much that you're going to parrot that kind of crazy out there?
Did you know that 100% of hurricanes are caused by nature? Shocking, I know. But according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, there's a secret cabal controlling the weather for political gain. Jon Stewart's about to school us all on the difference between actual facts and Facebook facts. Spoiler alert, MTG's weather conspiracy theory doesn't hold water, unlike the actual hurricanes she's talking about. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Did you find controlling the temperature in your house to be a power trip? Imagine that the weather was entirely under the control of government officials. Jon Stewart is going to dissect a conspiracy theory that is so ridiculous that it makes chemtrails look like a picnic. Recently, our favorite political comedian Jon Stewart was perplexed by a tweet he saw from Marjorie Taylor Greene.
The fact that a current member of Congress put something like that out in public, you should be ashamed of yourself, Marjorie.
Now Trump is out there saying that FEMA, they don't have enough money for relief for the victims of the hurricane because they were using that money on undocumented immigrants.
The claim that Greene made most recently, that Democrats are using disasters as a political tool, like she was giving a pitch for the worst movie that has ever been produced on the Weather Channel. Come along with me as I dive into this wild situation. Greene tweeted a picture that illustrated how voting districts and storm-affected areas lined up. It seems that she thinks Democrats are running a massive weather machine in Nancy Pelosi's basement. Jon described this one as a reality detached fever dream, worthy of a bad political thriller. Image: Jon laughed uncontrollably, leaned over a makeshift control panel, and pressed the Category 5 and light drizzle buttons emphatically. He might raise an eyebrow incredulously and ask, is this how Greene thinks it works? Do they have a team of evil weather scientists working around the clock to manipulate tropical depressions? This is where things become absurd though. If Democrats could control the weather, don't you think they might have used it in, I don't know, any of the previous elections? Jon points out the glaring flaw in this conspiracy theory. Yes, you make a valid point. Why did they wait until now to wreak havoc with the weather? To demonstrate how ridiculous this reasoning is, let's analyze some real storm studies. A hurricane is created when warm, humid air rises over the ocean to form a low pressure area. As ambient air is sucked in, heated, and then released, the cycle is repeated. Weather, wind patterns, and ocean currents all affect this complex process. Not exactly something that can be churned up in a lab or controlled remotely. Jon might demonstrate it by splashing around and making whooshing noises using a small pool and a fan. Observe? He might exclaim, "It's not so easy, is it?" while looking agitated and perspiring. If it were this simple, we'd have weather forecasters winning the lottery every week. The problem is, while we are all giggling at Greene's expense, there is a serious component to this.
Making this about politics, it is Donald Trump, and it's extremely frustrating. Over 200 Americans have been dead, and
yes, they control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done.
Conspiracy theories like these have the ability to do real harm. They cause faith in government agencies, scientific consensus, and even basic facts to be lost. These take priority over issues like emergency preparedness and climate change, which both demand significant attention. You can see how popular these concepts become. They give simple solutions to complex problems, which makes individuals feel more in control of an unpredictable world, but they also encourage people to believe fantastical tales that are based on real-life occurrences, which is a guaranteed way to deceive people. Continuing with the low-budget movie concept, what if a well-known author gave up his love of spinning windmills in exchange for a congressional seat? Here is Marjorie Taylor Greene, the very own Don Quixote of Capitol Hill. Rather than fighting monsters, she battles fictional weather robots. This is a contrast that our beloved political comic Jon Stewart was forced to make. Clad in makeshift armor, he reads reads Greene's tweets and declares theatrically, "Forsooth, the Democrats doth control the very heavens." Though it's entertaining, under all the humor is a serious message. Greene's theory of weather control is more than just a fad. This is only one instance of the alarming trend of catastrophe denialism in American politics. Remember when Trump suggested previously that California rake the forests to put out wildfires? Jon could make a poor Trump impression with a little rake and play out the scene. Listen, folks, we've got the best rakes, tremendous rakes. Just rake the woods and poof, that's all. Put out the fires.
Not getting the resources and the help they need because they're following Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene stupid down a rabbit hole.
Crazy thing is that Washington Post did a fact check, and it was actually Donald Trump during his administration who was taking money from FEMA.
But this is where the good times start to end. These conspiracy theories have real consequences. They erode confidence in government agencies and the consensus of scientists. Worse still, they draw attention away from the actual issues that need to be resolved. While we debunk weather control fallacies, real climate change and catastrophe preparedness are taking a back seat. It appears that Greene and the other conspiracy theorists are playing a strange game of look over there. Whenever we need to have a serious discussion about policy, they are constantly making absurd statements. All of a sudden, we're wasting time trying to disprove the idea that Nancy Pelosi kept a covert weather apparatus in her basement. What's intriguing is that by simply being aware of these tendencies, we may learn to spot this type of rhetoric in other political talks. It feels like you're teaching your brain to recognize foolish actions. Once you've seen one politician accuse a natural disaster of being a part of a plot, you can tell when other politicians try to pull off the same stunt. How do we improve our ability to recognize conspiracies if that is our goal? Seek for ludicrous claims that lack supporting data. It takes very strong evidence to support the argument that Democrats are capable of handling hurricanes. Second, stay away from notions that lend themselves easily to political bias. The moment a Republican says Democrats are influencing the weather, or a Democrat says Republicans cause earthquakes, your skepticism radar ought to shoot off the deep end. Imagine for a moment that we could develop a vaccine that would stop individuals from thinking conspiracies exist. No, that's not it. This isn't the kind that gives you magnetic abilities. I'm talking about a certain method that can identify and stop the spread of incorrect information. Want to develop the ability to ignore nonsense.
The seas will rise over the next 400 years, 1/8 of an inch, you know. Which means basically you have a little more beachfront property, okay?
What he says versus the numerous fact checks that are out there.
With Jon Stewart's Conspiracy Buster Toolkit, the ideal answer is right at your fingertips. Picture Jon waving about a ridiculously large magnifying glass labeled Fact Checker and equipped with a common sense detector button. With these tools, perhaps you'll be able to spot a conspiracy theory faster than Trump can tweet fake news. It's more entertaining to have a game show than to concentrate on tools. This show, Who Wants to Be a Conspiracy Millionaire, will put your skills to refute the ludicrous allegations to the test. For $1 million, he could ask, is the government controlling the weather, or is that just a bunch of hot air? Now comes the dramatic soundtrack and the participants starting to perspire. Of course, we can't ignore the real authority. Jon chooses to ask a meteorologist a string of increasingly ridiculous questions during the interview. So, doctor, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it that Nancy Pelosi has a weather machine in her basement? Observing the meteorologist's face would be entertaining. The thing is, even while we laugh, we're really learning something. These invented scenarios are teaching us to be less trusting of bold claims and more reliant on factual data. It's similar like sneaking vegetables into a child's lunch. They won't even realize they're learning. We also can't ignore the usefulness of these ridiculous theories. Jon said, it is extremely frustrating that at a time when so many of our fellow Americans are suffering, these politicians decide to politicize it and to promote conspiracy. It stops being a game as soon as actual lives are at stake.
Republicans are not sending their best and brightest to Washington anymore. It is unimaginable to me that at a time when so many of our fellow Americans are suffering.
These aren't the same people that you and I worked with over these many years. I just don't get it. I mean, in a national tragedy.
Then the issue becomes how to stop the dissemination of incorrect information. The first thing you should do when someone makes a stunning claim is look for amazing proof. Make it poor. If your neighbor says they can control the weather, give them a Skittles game. Not included are the Skittles? Not a belief. The second tip is to stay away from theories that are overly aligned with one's political viewpoints. If it sounds that way, it was probably taken straight out of a political advertising. In the actual world, things are more disorganized. Lastly, remember that concepts that sound like they belong in a bad science fiction film have no place in a serious political conversation. Weather control belongs only in fiction, unless we've just moved to a parallel reality where Sharknado is a documentary. The best part, though, is that once you start using these tools, you will start to see total and utter absurdity everywhere. What if you could sense absurdity with a sixth sense?